brothers and sisters, I'm Gerard, the International President of the best fighting union on the planet. Believe me, serving as your president is an honor and a privilege that always humbles me, because I'm not only leading the greatest union there is, I have the honor and the privilege of serving the greatest members anyone could ever hope to lead, the members of the United Steelworkers. I'm also privileged to serve as your president in the shadow of some great labor leaders who I've learned so much from and who I respect so deeply. Hardly a day goes by that I don't think about how lucky I have been to serve under the leadership of my good friend, President George Becker. George was that rare leader who loved the members he served as much as he condemned the bosses who would abuse our members. George kept us strong and bargained unprecedented deals for our retirees as the tsunami of bankruptcies swept through our union. First, it swept in from the Asian collapse. Then it swept in from Russia, before it hit from South America, and before it finally took down more than 40 of our employers. On top of leading us through those troubled times, George led us in the fight to condemn the rotten free trade deals that have become the killing field of industrial jobs. George led us in the Battle of Seattle. And let me tell you, he never stood down to anyone who opposed us, including a sitting U.S. president. I would like for you to now join me in applauding his memory as if he were still here with us, because his fighting spirit is still here. It's the beating heart of this great union. And because of George's foresight, in addition, it was my good fortune to work with the leader who brought to our union a merger with Pace. He brought to us a legacy of integrity, a man who saw that the future of the industrial labor movement was more important than any one person's high office, a man who put the importance of his members above any measure whatsoever of his own self-importance. Unfortunately, he's not able to be with us today either, but please join me in honoring the former president of Pace, Brother Boyd Young. Of course, coming up through the ranks as I have, I was blessed to have as my mentor one of the greatest labor leaders of the 20th century, a Canadian, I might add, and I'm proud to say, who led our union through the valley of industrial death, a valley that threatened the very existence of our union in the 1980s. But he taught us by example that only by inspiring the members to rise up and fight back could we save ourselves. This person never let the bullies of corporate privilege kill his dream of securing the rights of working men and women. He never wavered in his belief that progress without justice for working people is nothing but an empty promise. And so I ask all of you now to rise and applaud a man who still inspires us to dream big, even in our darkest hours. Our brother, our leader, the undying spirit of our union, President Emeritus Lynn R. Williams, and my very dear friend, Lynn Williams. Thank you, sisters and brothers, for giving George, Boyd, and Lynn your heartfelt respect. And let me say this also. Welcome to Las Vegas, home of one of America's two great casinos. And in case some of you are wondering, where is this other casino? Well, that other casino is right down on Wall Street. That's the one where they rip off your money and they don't even want to give you a chance to win. The other big difference between Las Vegas and Wall Street is that the hookers in Vegas don't wear three-piece suits. How many of you were delegates when we met in convention 3 years ago? Please raise your hands. It's sure been a hell of a ride since then, hasn't it? Back then, we were riding high. We had just signed one of the best steel contracts in our history. We fought off some of the tire companies that were trying to rob our retirees of their pensions. We were making real headway, bringing some rhyme and reason to bargaining in the paper sector. And we were gearing up to take on an oil industry whose profits are obscene, whose health benefits were a shadow of what they should be, an oil industry whose safety record is a disgrace to themselves and to this country. But we adjourned with high hopes for the election at hand, and very little idea of just how bad the economic storm would be that was about to hit. But when it hit, we sure as hell found out how hard it was going to hit. They want to call it the Great Recession. But that's too nice a name for what it really is. What they should call it, and we should call it, is the Great Wall Street Ripoff. Because that's what the bankers on Wall Street and Bay Street did. And the mortgage brokers they financed did every day to working people in both our countries. These bandits bet against their own investments so they would make a killing, whether the people they were advising won or lost. And sisters and brothers, their addiction to runaway profits and bloated bonuses destroyed millions of our jobs. They ripped off millions of home buyers to feed their addiction. And what really galls me the most is that they then turned around and they stuck us with the bill for their thieving ways. I almost swore. For their thieving ways. They ripped off our governments for hundreds of billions of dollars to bail them out, all across the globe. But there's one thing that's clear. It was an equal opportunity ripoff, because both Republicans and Democrats alike took part in this economic heist. As a matter of fact, they took turns at the trough. First, it was Bush's Treasury Secretary, Henry Paulson. Henry Paulson, who had helped build the Ponzi schemes when he was the CEO of Goldman Sachs on Wall Street. Then Paulson trotted down to Washington and became George Bush's Treasury Secretary. And from that position, he demanded $800 billion in bailouts from Bush to cover the lousy bets he and others had made while they were on Wall Street. And before that, Bill Clinton's former Treasury Secretary, Robert Rubin, the world's leading cheerleader for free trade. He had raked in millions as the chair of Goldman Sachs. Then he bilked the system for another $126 million. As chairman of Citigroup during the depth of the Wall Street ripoff. Basically, this guy got paid that money for playing deaf, dumb, and blind on Wall Street as they destroyed the housing market, undermined the entire global economy. Sisters and brothers, these guys shouldn't be going to state dinners. They ought to be going to state prison, and we ought to help put them there. You know, a few of the bit players got slapped around. A few of the Wall Street bit players got slapped. And then we got a half-baked banking regulation that they passed and still opposed. But nobody can tell me that justice has been done until at least one of these sorry bastards at the top of Wall Street spends time in jail. been a hell of a tough ride these last 3 years. But in truth, sisters and brothers, even back in 2008, we were living a lie. It was our bipartisan lie that our leaders have been feeding us for much of our lives. They've been lying about our economies to cover up the fact that they're not really working for us anymore. They're not working for working people anymore. Yeah, okay. Thanks to our union, some have been doing a bit better, but millions of workers and their families haven't. Real wages have been flat for years. Household incomes are stagnant, despite the fact that most cases, both parents are working. And the growing gap between the rich and the rest of us is a disgrace. And that growing gap between the rich and the rest of us cannot be sustained. It cannot survive. Politicians have been covering up the fact that working people's fortunes are falling fast. And on top of that, they've been robbing the Social Security Trust Fund for years. Sisters and brothers, they've ripped off that fund over the years for more than $4 trillion. And now they've got the gall to tell us that benefits have to be cut. Well, don't you believe it? It isn't rocket science. The same clowns that couldn't tell us 3 months before the economic collapse in 2008, that same gang is now trying to tell us that they know what will happen to Social Security in 2035. They were lying before, and they're lying now. And what their lies are covering up is the fact that they're not working for us anymore. They're working for the corporate billionaires who lavish their campaign cash all over them. At least in Canada. Canada had the good sense to take campaign finance out of private hands. At least for now. At least for now. Because the new Canadian Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, he even wants to get rid of that. Boo the bastard, go ahead. I feel better already. But you know what? Our party in Canada, our Labour Party, the New Democratic Party, they're fighting now. They're fighting now to stop him dead in his tracks. But sisters and brothers, here in the US, public finance isn't even a gleam in most politicians' eyes. And the beat goes on and on and on, unabated. As of last year, politicians were raking in roughly $4 billion in campaign cash. Almost 300% more than they were in 1972. You would think that's bad enough, but it's not bad enough. The Reagan-Bush Supreme Court has now anointed corporate royalty with the so-called right to finance politicians at their whim. The right to finance politicians completely in the dark and in total secrecy, with no disclosure of any kind. Sisters and brothers, under that Supreme Court ruling, they can even launder money from foreign corporations into our elections. So make no mistake about this. Make no mistake about this. Letting corporations finance campaigns is a formula for turning our democracy into Wall Street's corporatocracy. And I don't know about you. I don't know about you, sisters and brothers, but to my last breath, I am not going to let the fate of my children and grandchildren be dictated to by billionaires and millionaires on Wall Street. We're going to fight back.